That's right. You know what time it is? It's time for another episode of Forward Thinking Leaders. I'm one of your hosts, Mike. Let's get into it.
You're alive in us. We're alive in you.
Someday I'm just going to let the whole song play, and people are like, what are you doing? Just let it keep going. It's one of my favorite songs. But anyways, as I said, I'm Mike, and today is the first time to do this recording together with our collaborator. So first, let's say hi to Mike.
How's everybody doing today? Welcome back. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
So our first time ever recording was last week.
Correct.
So how was it for you?
I was really, really scared until I got here and started doing it, and then it just kind of flowed.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
so
nice.
So this time not as nervous.
Oh, I'm just as nervous.
See, when you do kingdom work, that's all right. That's what happens.
That's
Sometimes we get nervous, right? And then, of course, the other one, you already know my other brother named Benjamin Jones. What's going on?
Man, super happy to be here with Mike 1 and Mike 2.
Who's one?
Don't put
You
that
can be
pressure
one.
on either one
You
of
can
us.
be
That's-
one. Now, Ben and I did a little bit of recording before. Not a lot,
Yeah.
but a video that a project that you were doing.
Yeah.
And again, though, it just seems so natural.
That's kind of how I knew, like, man, this could happen. We could do this because it was natural from the very first time. So,
Yeah. Now, of course, this episode we spent the last 24 hours really digging into and getting ready for, but that's not no, I'm just kidding. Anyways, our 4 words for today are welcome interruptions as guests. I'm going to say it again because it's a pain. Welcome interruptions as guests. This is a hard one, especially if you're kind of a person who likes to plan, a person who likes to have their day already in order from start to finish.
Yeah.
If you're a person of routine, especially, I guess, if you're kind of a type A person where everything has a place and then other things don't have a place, it can be hard, but I know we usually don't start off with the Bible stories in the beginning, but we want to today just to kind of set the tone, and then we'll get into the conversation. But if we look at Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 56, is when Jesus crossed over the lake, and there was a guy there named Jairus who was waiting for him, and Jairus had a daughter who was dying. And so Jairus was, you got a picture, he was eagerly awaiting. He was anticipating. I'm sure that as the boat was getting closer and closer, he was like starting to, shaking, like, come on, we got to go. Because his daughter, this is real time. We read this story and we can see the start to finish, and we're like, oh, it's not that big a deal. But for him in that moment, it was everything. So he's sitting there and he's just like, I'm sure full of anticipation, and my daughter is literally dying as I wait for you to cross. And then Jesus arrives. And so on his behalf or his perspective, he's crossing over to do something, to do ministry. But maybe on the boat, he was like, hey, I'm going to take a nap when I get there, right? I mean, we don't know. I'm sure he was tired. He was also had the human body to deal with.
Right. Yeah.
But as soon as he gets out of that boat, the Bible says that Jairus went up to him and pleaded with him to come and heal his daughter. So that was the first interruption that Jesus had in his schedule. And if that's not enough, we can know that as he was heading there, the crowds were surrounding him because they knew he was coming.
Of course.
Could you imagine trying to plan something as
way.
Jesus?
No way.
It's not going to work, right? So the crowds are surrounding him. On comes the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. Such a powerful story that we could unpack in a different episode, I'm sure. But Jesus is going, and this woman fights through the crowd. She's seen all the doctors. She's spent all of her money. There's nothing left. She's bleeding. She just wants to die. It's just a life of misery. She touches his cloak, and immediately she's healed. Now, think about this from the point of view of Jesus. I'm already being interrupted, let's say, going to see Jairus' daughter. And then someone touches me with faith because I feel healing going out. That's what he said, right? So Jairus is like, let's go, let's go, let's go. My daughter's dying. And Jesus is like, whoa, stop. Somebody just touched me, right? Now, I'm sure that his disciples are like, Jesus, there's 100 people touching you. His daughter is dying. We got to go. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I just felt healing power go out of me. And so he stops. And I'm thinking, if that's me, if I'm Jairus in that moment, and I'm like, I'm so close to getting you to my daughter. I'm so close to the healing I've been believing for and praying for so long, right? I'm here, and you're going to stop?
Right.
So he stops, and finally the woman realizes she can't hide it, and she says, it was me. And he's like, hey, your faith has made you well. And then the Bible says while he's talking to her, the servants of Jairus come and say, don't bother the teacher anymore. It's too late. Your daughter has died. And now imagine that. Imagine the feeling of being Jairus and like, I knew it. I knew that we shouldn't have stopped. I knew that we couldn't have time, to heal this person because I needed this over here. But of course, Jesus said, no, don't worry. She's just sleeping because he's Jesus.
Right.
Wow.
They go on, they get to the house. Obviously, he heals her, brings her back to life, says that she's just sleeping, but a very, very deep sleep without breathing and turning blue.
Come on. It's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Brings her back to life. And sometimes, when we have these interruptions in our life, it can seem like it's going to ruin everything else, when really maybe it's just going to make everything else all the more glorious. The healing of Jairus' daughter was all the more glorious because it happened as Jesus intended it to, right? As it was supposed to. But from my perspective, if I were him, I wasn't going to see it that way. So I know that's a lot of talking. Sorry to just go straight with that. But that's what we're talking about today. When interruptions come and kind of ruin our plans,
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes it's for the betterment.
Man, let me say this. Just being on that portion of the story, you think about it. When you think about Jairus, who, there's a certain solace that comes over you because Jesus is here now, right? And you're in this position, this disposition where, you are surrendered and submitted, and you're like, oh, I'm in the perfect position. I believe in Jesus. He's right in front of me. I can see him. My daughter's going to be healed. And I think a lot of us can kind of resonate with that position. What's revealed in some of us, namely myself, is that though you look like you're in a position of submittance to Jesus, what happens is when you get those interruptions, you realize that you wanted him to submit to your timeline.
Oh, that's good.
Right? Because if anything goes wrong and it's off of what I had planned, then it's not going to go right? And that reveals that I wanted God to do something. I know he could, but only within my timeline.
Right.
If it's outside of my timeline, then it definitely can't happen, which is him essentially having to submit to something that you had planned. And it's just a kind of a kind of wacky way to have that revealed in your life. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. I never thought of it. So it's like, I'll submit to your will if you'll submit to my timeline, or I'll submit to what you tell me to do. It's kind of like the guy who said, let me go and bury my family first.
Yes.
And Jesus let the dead bury the dead. Like,
Yep.
we got work to do, Interruptions is guess. What do you think, Mike?
Excuse me. Well, I have a family member who has been struggling with addiction for quite a while. And it really plays into that whole timeline. You think, okay, God, I need you to move now. And then it doesn't happen. And you're like, okay, God, how about now? And it doesn't happen. And she's come through it, and she's on the other side of it, and it's brought glory to the kingdom. And it's just, you never see that when you're in the midst of it.
Yeah.
You think it's just all the treachery and all the downside of the addiction process. And the fact that she's walked through it and is now giving, they're asking her to talk in classes and things like that. So just the level that it's come from to where she's at now, and just, like I said, it's giving glory to God for sure.
You mean they're asking her to speak to other people who are going through it? Mm-hmm. So, we hear these stories from afar, but talk about interruptions. I can't imagine how many interruptions you and the rest of the family went through during that process.
Man, it's something else we can unpack on a different topic, but it was just a lot of sorrow, a lot of stress, a lot of heartache. You just see somebody going through it, and you want to do so much for them, but there's nothing that you can really do. It's really up to them, and the only person who can change them is Jesus, and you kind of have to let that play out. And it's so hard to do sometimes. You just want to do something, and there's nothing that you can do.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got a little bit of a lighter story than that. I was in, no, I like it. I'm just, it's like variety. I was in the Philippines, and I was at the checkout at a store, and I needed to go because usually we just plan things kind of back to back there. It's just how it was in missionary. I loved it, but sometimes it was just crazy. So I'm in line, and I'm waiting to get checked out, and everything's going so slow, and I'm there, and I feel something or somebody kind of grab at my back pockets a few times, Now I'm in the Philippines, so obviously it's a pickpocket is what you think, right? Okay, although if it's a pickpocket, I probably never would have felt it. That's how good they are, right?
Wow.
That's how good they are.
Good to know.
So I just ignore it for a second because my wallet's not back there, and then I feel it again, but this time it's kind of like a grab in my back pocket, and I'm like, man, this is. So I turn around, and there's a boy there. He's about 13 years old at the time, and he's blind. And he was I looked up and his mom was there, and she just had this big old smile on her face, and I looked down, and he's got the pole and the glasses, and she just told him that there's a really big foreigner in front of you. He's like, where? So he just reached out to touch,
Wow.
And so I turn around and I say hi, and to my surprise, he answers me in perfect English.
Nice.
I mean, there, obviously there's English over there, but you don't meet many 13, 14-year-old kids who can speak English as well as he did.
Yeah.
So he answers me in perfect English. So I was taken back, and we start talking, and such a intelligent young man. He's older now. He's in his 20s, but we start doing that, and he's like, well, I want to meet your family. Okay, now, this is cool, right? But as you know how it is, especially in the mission field, you're doing 1,000 things at once, right? And I had places to go and things to do, and from one schedule to the next. But I was like, man, I want to get to know you more, right? I mean, here we have this teenage boy who was, grabbing in my back pockets,
That's awesome.
speaking in this perfect English to me, So we set it up, and he and his mom came over within a few days. I don't remember exactly, to meet my family, and then to just completely break the cultural norm, he brought all kinds of chocolates and candies for my kids. Now, that's significant because in the Philippines, when you're the visitor or foreigner coming from like the U.S. or something, that's when you bring all the good candy and chocolate and stuff, right? Because it was too expensive there. But he brought it to us and to my kids, with his mom. And we start talking, and man, he's a pianist and he's a singer. And then through the years, we're Facebook friends, and he'll probably hear this at some point. He's playing piano now overseas in Japan and different places, and he's representing the Blind Society.
Wow.
And he is like,
That's
Come
amazing.
on.
he's like a genius,
Yeah, that's
as
awesome.
far as composing music and stuff. But if I had just kind of brushed him off in that moment, which is sad to say, I probably have other encounters. I know I have other encounters that could have been similar to that I brushed off.
Oh, you're not the only one.
Yeah, that I brushed off, that I don't have time for this right now.
Life is so busy, and if you just don't take the time to take the time sometimes, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
takes time to take the time to do things. So
Yeah.
it's
I think too what that's really called is like it's somehow it's the power of recognition, recognizing the value of the moment as opposed to it just being another kind of like niche in your day. Slowing that day down and recognizing, man, this could be a moment. And I'm sure for sure that I've had those times where in retrospect, I'm like, I think that was a moment that I may have missed. And then in sometimes, like, I'll give you guys just a real quick example. I was in conversation, literally how I became pastoring was I had my whole plan, right? Me and my wife, and we had just served at a church for almost 4 years. And we got connected to our church that we were in, and the pastor asked me, he says, hey, so what's your plan? How are you going to take care of your family? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a police officer. And I had the application.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, man, I was ready, because in my mind, it's like, how can I add value to the community, one, and then how can I take care of my family, right? And it just seemed like the perfect mix for me to do that. And so pastor at the time, he said, so what if you didn't do that? And I'm like, okay, so now all these questions come up and these concerns like, okay, what are you talking about? Because they have to check these boxes, family and security and consistency and all these things. He said, what if you did add value to the community, but you did it in a different way? And he was talking about pastoring, of course. Obviously, I'm thinking about, how's I going to pay bills? Whatever. But the big thing is that when I felt something in that moment, right? It was nowhere near equivalent to Jesus feeling virtue leave, right? But I felt something in the moment we were talking, and I was like, this isn't just typical, right? And so though I had no questions answered, I was like, I wanted to dig in more. And, obviously for the sake of having a long story, it's exactly where I was supposed to be. But if I would have just been totally focused on what I did and what I had, I would have missed something that I ultimately wanted and was called to, So
That's kind of funny. So if I'm hearing you right, the fact that you're pastoring right now was an interruption.
it was definitely an interruption, man. Yeah, so serious.
I love it.
Yep,
solid.
Yeah.
it was an interruption, man. So a good one, of course.
Well, we're already at 15 minutes, man. You see how easy this is, but let's go back to something that you said in that what you just shared, which is the moment. Because as we think about all of this, as we think about what Mike said and you said, talking about being in the moment. And so that's what Jesus was, right? I mean, he was a man who was in the moment, and he understood the importance of that. And, you know, for us, I feel like, how do we balance that? Because I have a mortgage and I have 3 kids and a wife, and I have these responsibilities, you know, and at the same time, like you said, if I don't live in that moment, you know, I could miss something. So like, I'm trying to figure out, how do I balance the most important things when it becomes the moment versus responsibility I already have? How do we know? I'm gonna go to you, Mike. How do we know when it's time to just step back and kind of create that space, or like, no, I got to get to what I got to get to?
Man, if you can figure that out on a regular basis, let me know how you do that.
We'll sell the formula.
Because life is just so busy. It's so fast paced these days, and everything is right now. And it's so easy just to go through life like that and miss things. So it really does. It has to be a mental decision to make that step back. And because if you don't, life is just going to keep trucking by you. You have to physically step back and take the time to do it.
Yeah. What about you, Ben?
I agree. No, you know what? Honestly, I feel like, you know, to go along with what Mike was saying is, I think for me especially, the biggest way to be in the moment is to trust God. And that sounds super churchy and super cliche-ish, but the reason why I don't have time is because I don't have time for the moment is because I'm in fear of what's next. I have to go to work because I'm in control over my life. I can't take time and smell the roses because I have to get ahead. We're being motivated by fear and anxiety and all these other things.
That's good.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so what happens is, when trust is built, and I know what the Word of God says about me, what God has spoken over me and my family, there's a rest that comes. And when there's that rest, I'm not in need to rush, right? Now, I'm still horrible at time management, so that's only a part of it, right? But when I'm not being motivated by these feelings and anxieties and certain things, I have more time to be in the moment. Like, for example, if the well-being of my family is only in my hands, if I see somebody who is, for whatever reason, struggling to do something in the street and I got to go to work, it's like, oh, I got to leave this person here because I got to take care of my family, as opposed to knowing, no, God has my family. And this is a moment where I can show the love of God and helping this person. That'll be there. And so I think it's just trust.
That's good.
Yeah, and everything is in the moment, right? All like wonderful things can happen in the moment. So I'm sure we're going to continue to unpack these type of concepts and ideas and everything in future episodes. But hey, any closing thoughts? First to you, Mike, then to Ben.
No, I just think you have to pay attention to God's voice, and He'll set you in the direction you need to be, and be able to capture those moments you're supposed to capture.
Awesome, Ben.
Yeah, I would just say kind of what I left off with, just trust God and know that your life is taken care of. It's in His hands, and He'll give you more time for the moment.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's it for today. Remember to welcome Interruptions as guests, and as always, stay alive in Him.
We're alive in you.